So, welcome everybody to our second conversation about being more of a leader in your own life. I'm Abigail Larison, and I'm here with my sister.
Molly, hi.
So, we left our conversation last time with some homework to look at ways in which we experienced joy in our lives, like those things that inspired us and made us happy. And so part of that we've been considering to be like a foundational step in being more in alignment with what we want to share with the world, with what our gifts are, with where we feel most comfortable and in alignment with who we truly are. So what was on your list, Molly?
Well, first, I'll add that, one thing I've learned over time is that leaning on our strengths is just so much more to our advantage than trying to develop other areas. So a lot of times we also enjoy the things that we're good at. So yeah, I think that there's definitely a kind of a win-win in that being able to identify what those things are. In some cases, maybe we're not good at them. I might love calculus, doesn't mean I'm great at it. But yeah, in terms of the things that bring me joy, I would say I went through this exercise a while back and realized that creating graphics and writing and doing research about all kinds of things, particularly philosophy and psychology, are things that bring me joy. What did you find?
Well, it's funny because I kind of picked in on the things that were like closest to me right now, like just being in nature, doing some gardening, things that I found myself doing with when the kids would be over and, their laughter like would just bring me a lot of joy. And so this idea of like our what brings us joy is one level, and then what you just brought up was our skills, like the things that we do where we feel competent and confident, and there's something really powerful in that too. So I didn't really spend a lot of time thinking about that, but I imagine as we're moving into the next phase of thinking about creating some kind of vision for ourselves for how we can spend more time doing that thing that we truly love, that thing that brings us joy, and where we're really meant to share a light in the world, to consider those aspects, not just of what brings us joy, but of what we're good at, and what we feel really competent in and confident. And in fact, if I think about self-determination theory, one of the core elements of self-determination theory, and that is by self-determination, it means I'm determining my own life path, which is very much aligned with this idea of like standing in my light and who I'm meant to be. And that competency is one of the core elements of that theory. So it's interesting that you brought that up. I hadn't thought about that, but absolutely, for people who are um, ready to step into this next section, perhaps a week of also thinking about our skill sets would be worthwhile.
Yeah, I love that. We talked, I mean, we emailed a little bit about this, and I remember I didn't write any of those things. Well, maybe I wrote the graphics piece. But yeah, I think that like being in nature is something that I really enjoy. And then I've taken on this project of seedlings, and it's a nightmare. I mean, it's consuming so much of my time, and I don't know what to do with them. And I have too many in each little, you're supposed to put 2 seeds, but they're so small. So like 10 would fall in there, and now they're like overcrowding. And then, I left that house and I left the light on, and now they're overstimulated. So it's definitely not one of my strengths, and I think it's causing me a little bit of stress. But I do love the plants once they start growing. So I can
So
get
that's
started.
interesting too. The idea that like as we are stepping into the things that bring us joy, maybe we aren't experts in it yet. And is that okay? Can we be okay with that? Can we recognize that as like just part of the process? I know for the projects that I'm doing here with the community house, like pretty much everything is a first. And when you have a bunch of firsts, that means you're not an expert at it at all, and the idea of hiring an expert makes me feel very happy, and yet I'm not an expert when it comes to hiring. So we're still figuring that out. But what that brings me back to is this idea of the vision, and I really feel like the vision is such an important part of the process of being able to kind of step into doing more of what I love. And even if I'm not an expert, being able to make the mistakes, but just holding true to that vision of what is driving me. So I was wondering if we looked at some of the things that brought us joy, if we could think about doing some kind of visioning exercise with that.
Yeah, yeah, vision is definitely, I mean, even when you think about the seedlings, like if my vision was really to become a master gardener and to have a beautiful garden and to do it all myself, and to learn the skills for that, then yeah, I mean, I would persist, and it would be part of the process. So I think that you're right. That vision, when that vision is in place, then the little hurdles and challenges that come along the way are just, they seem a lot more integrated and part of that process, and they don't feel as much of a like waste of time, which is what I think in some cases, when I'm doing things that aren't towards my vision, they feel very much like a waste of time. So yes, I think the vision, I agree 100%. So how do you start that process of creating a vision?
Well, for me, I guess it really was a matter of kind of tapping into like, what is it that I really most want to see in the world around me, and I can just take the example of your garden space, even having the vision of a beautiful garden, but perhaps having the vision of a garden that even serves in some other higher way, to feed even into more of your heart's desires. What do I most desire? I mean, if I were to ask myself that question, it's not necessarily the things that bring me joy, but it's like a bigger concept. Like in this case, community was something that I kept feeling the need for loving, supportive community, and I really don't know where that came from, because to a certain extent, my own personality is one of like, I like to be alone, and I used to call myself antisocial, but perhaps that was uh, an over exaggeration. But there's just something that I feel so deeply to live in loving community, and everybody I'm sure has something different that if they look deeply into their own being, that they're feeling deeply moved to help create in their lives or in their families or in their communities. Um, and so I think that is a starting point. And
So
then,
yeah,
oh,
just figure out your life's desire.
I guess that's, well, I mean, that, and then, not to say, and then to look around and say, well, what's needed in order for me to move toward that? You know, what's stopping me from seeing that around me? And and so that was a critical point of being able to make an entryway into doing something. But like if you look at your own projects that you've created, that not for work, but from outside of work of your own initiative, or it could even be through work. If it was something that like you felt just driven to do, what was it that inspired you?
Yeah, and I think that any big challenge that I've had to overcome in my life has inspired me to want to do something off of the lessons that I learned off that. So there's an element of education that I feel like, does everyone else have to go through the same level of struggle? And in the case of the co-parenting piece, where I wanted to, and I still want to, it's not, kind of slid off my radar when I moved into this new field, which I became quite passionate about. Um, was, there's no reason that couples who are breaking up need to go through as much turmoil as they go through just to set a schedule for their children when everyone has the same objective. And so for me, it just seemed very simple, like razor's Occam, like or Occam's razor, which is like the most simple solution is the solution. Which is like there should just be a template. I mean, there pretty much is. So in my mind, it was like, how do I get the word out? How do I create a process for people to go through, like a really simple process to help them both heal as couples and um, to like help their children, to give the children the best of both worlds, of both parents, and as part of a single family, which may be extended beyond, the mother and the father, and siblings. So I do think that, those challenges that we face, they do give us kind of a jumping off point once we get through the tunnel. Maybe a bunch of stuff's going to come out of COVID, because I feel like we've all kind of been going through, some people, darker stages than others, or having to overcome more hurdles than others. But that was definitely a starting point. And then the concept of helping others, simplifying processes, helping people save money, when they don't need to spend loads of money on something that could be better directed to resources for the children or whatever else.
So one thing I heard you say, which I think is a common experience, and a really powerful uh, point of focus for clarifying one's vision, is this idea of the the place of pain or the place of suffering that becomes the source of someone's desire to help someone else not to experience that. And that there, so it's interesting that the thing that I don't want actually becomes something that helps me clarify what I do want. And maybe my desire for loving community was a feeling that like of rejection or social isolation, which was partly my own doing, but partly because I didn't really have the same level of social skills that a lot of people are just birthed with. And so maybe that's where that came out of, that feeling of not being a part of or welcomed made me want to create that. So that's an interesting point. I think that could be a really powerful exercise for people.
Yeah, and as when you're talking about your experience also, I see that, particularly when you're looking at how we're being perceived by others, like how we want to be perceived, and then how others are perceiving us. Like we want to connect with others, and then it seems like they're not responding in a way that we would would be ideal, right? Which would allow for community and friendships. And that goes into kind of some things that we were talking about in the last call around, you know, being able to be yourself and be authentic and be accepted. I think it's something that so many of us crave, and yet it's not, it doesn't feel like a standard. Like it doesn't feel like that's the default. It feels like the default is you exist within the smaller units, and those units accept you, and you have to be accepted into that unit for one reason or another. Like that A-list concept, right? Where A-listers, there's scientific research that shows, I don't know how good the science is, but it shows that an A-lister cannot be friends with a B-lister. If they are, then all of a sudden the rest of the A-listers reject them, right? And it's like that kind of like living within those parameters is so not like who you are or who I am or how who many people are. But it is like this dominant voice that we all kind of have to like kind of like navigate around.
I'm putting a note here. And I do think that that the core of this course offering personal development module, whatever you want to call it, is to help individuals find their own unique voice and be able to stand in that without fear of being kicked off the A list or whatever. So I think that that ability to stand true to who you are, irregardless of the dominant voice, and recognize that your unique song or tune or quality that you bring is important, that it's a necessary piece, and if we don't, all of us start standing more in integrity, we'll lose out, we'll all lose out, and it's your life to live. So I say, what other life do you want to live? Someone else's decision for you or your own? And so and also to get back to that idea of like the places where we struggle and those places where we suffer, a lot of times I feel like people are like, okay, well, you just need to get over it. You just need to get over it. And I feel like, well, what a loss of opportunity for that person to be able to help and support someone else who's been going through that. And being in recovery 12-step programs, I know how much value that has in the collective experience, that we don't have to reinvent the wheel, and that we don't have to be alone with whatever we're struggling with, and that others are there to help guide and support. I mean, I think YouTube has totally changed the world of psychology, because basically anything you're dealing with, you can go on and find someone who's going to give you some guidance and understanding of what you're going through. And that's amazing. That's a wonderful place to see our energies and our unique voices coming to the forefront and doing what they're meant to do. So
Yeah, I love that. I do. I wasn't even thinking of that. That like you can find a voice that will validate, your experience, which is something that we need. I think as children, there are definitely some parenting styles which when the child is like, I'm sad, I'm crying, and the parents like, no, you're fine, right? And from the very young age, they're taught that their feelings are not real, or they don't matter, or however they process that information. And I think as adults, it's in a lot of cases no different in that concept of just get over it, toughen up, you'll be fine. Like, or, you're going through a breakup and, um, you know, in some cases, people disappear, particularly as you get older, or like widows, right? Someone loses a spouse and all their friends, they're scared and they disappear, and they don't want to have that to be a part of their reality, and to think that we're missing out on so much of what life has to offer through those experiences that we go through, that brings us closer together, and closer to ourselves, understanding ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And this important piece of really being honest with ourselves and true about where we're at and where we want to be, and rather than like simply projecting where we want to be. So this, I just see this true value in looking at the negative in this case. And I, for someone who likes the spiritual path and all the law of attraction has to say, I do feel that there is a big something missing when we try to ignore any negative emotions, because they're just as valid. They have a reason. They're there. The things that we go through that are trials, or what I like to refer to as ordeals, these are the places that are the most powerful, impactful, and significant events in our lives. As much as the beautiful, joyful moments, these, what you would call the trough, so you have the peak experience and then you have the trough. Those are just as powerful and soulful experiences, and that there's so much richness to be gleaned from them. So I'm just wondering if we can leave with an exercise for people to do something by kind of looking at those biggest challenges that they've had and what are the gifts that came out of those, to help people see more clearly where they might step into a bigger vision, where they can contribute in the world. So can I leave you with the duty of coming up with an activity like you did last week so perfectly?
I mean, I think that is an activity in and of itself, isn't it? I mean, you're exploring what those challenges were, and how you what you learned from them, and the power and strength that it gave you, whether you're using it and applying it today or not, and how it makes you feel. Like that feeling of getting overcoming challenges or failures is something that can bring great joy as well.
Okay, so let's break it down. Let's say, okay, so identify 1, 2, 3 or more challenges, depending on how deep you want to go. Ask yourself, what were the feelings that you felt during that time? What were the lessons that you learned, and what values they identified in yourself? And then I'm going to add one more. I want you to think of what would have been your ideal outcome and what would have been needed for you to achieve it, with this idea of like, maybe you can help provide that to the next person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great.
Okay, so should we leave our viewers with that exercise?
Yep, it's a simple exercise.
And we will see you next time.